Sprout Super is a very complicated mechanic because there's an algorithm behind it that makes it fill in the gaps between walls, so that way it'll grow a little bit and completely fill any open gaps there are. But exactly how this algorithm works is still kind of confusing. So I examined a lot of different situations to see if I could come up with the rules that actually are behind this program that tell it how to fill in these specific gaps, and hopefully this will be useful so that way you can know exactly how your wall is going to form in any given situation. Now here are the rules I came up with. It looks like a lot at first, but I'm going to go through and explain everything real quick. So first let me explain what the colors mean. So whenever there's a gray space, that means there's nothing in it. Whenever there's a purple tile, that's supposed to represent a wall. And whenever there's a green tile, that's supposed to represent the hedge that you place with Sprout Super. And down at the bottom, the dark green represents a hedge that was originally placed in that 5-tile cross that you throw whenever you use your super. And then those light green tiles are the hedges that grow off of that cross, so they weren't in the original 5 tiles. But up at the top, the middle shade of green just represents any type of hedge, whether it was the original or it grew off the original. And the first rule that this algorithm seems to follow is it always closes up 1-tile gaps. And these are empty spaces that have a wall on one side and a hedge on another. I guess technically it could also work if there's a hedge on one side and a hedge on another, but you can see with that empty space in the middle, it'll make sure to fill it in so that way there aren't any 1-tile gaps, because those are very tight and sort of difficult to walk through. So it's understandable that they want to avoid having any of those on the map. Then another situation the algorithm tries to work around is when a wall and a hedge are on diagonal squares. So you can see there, if there's a wall and a square and then there's a hedge diagonally adjacent to it, then it's going to fill in one of those 2 empty squares. And the square it fills in is always going to be in the horizontal direction, comparative to the original hedge. So essentially, in the first example, the hedge can grow down or right, and it always goes horizontally, so it's going to go right. And in the second example, it can go up or left, and so it has to go left because that's the horizontal direction. And then we have a similar situation that it tries to avoid, which is the same diagonal thing, except there's a space in between the 2 walls. So you can see in that first example, there is the wall in the bottom right, and then diagonally 2 tiles away from it, there is a hedge. And one thing to note for this situation is that that wall actually can't have any walls adjacent to it towards the direction of the hedge. So that's why I've made sure to fill those squares in gray, because they need to be empty in order for this situation to take place. And then if this is the case when you spawn your hedges, then the algorithm is going to automatically fill in that middle tile. So then it becomes essentially 3 tiles as a diagonal. This also happens in other directions, as you can see with the second example. Now the hedge is in the bottom left and the other hedge or the wall is in the top right, and that wall doesn't have any walls adjacent to it, like I said before. And then it's going to fill in that middle open space. And now this accounts for a lot of the situations, but I actually found in certain cases there's some really random things happening, and it didn't seem like they followed all these rules. So this might have something to do with the way in which the algorithm is ordered, and maybe it starts like on the left and then goes clockwise, and because of that it screws some things up. So when things should be symmetrical, they're not. But essentially, to try to account for that, I came up with some special cases. And so these probably aren't directly programmed into the algorithm that decides how it's going to fill in the gaps, but it's going to appear like these are programmed in because they're really just side effects of whatever is happening behind the scenes. So the first special case is when there is a sort of L shape, and you can see in the first frame, there are 3 light green hedges, which means they were grown off the original 5-tile hedge. There are 3 of those on the bottom, and then there is the original hedge. There's 1 tile of that on top, so that it creates that L shape. And then once this happens, it's going to actually fill in that space in the top middle that's directly next to the original hedge. And now note that this case only happens when that dark green tile, the original hedge, is on the top row. It actually doesn't work when it's on the bottom row. Like I said, this is a really special case. This wasn't directly programmed in, I don't think, but this is just sort of a side effect of whatever is going on behind the scenes in the algorithm. So it is something you need to take into account. And then the other special case I found was with a 3-tile L, and this is very similar, except it works with fewer tiles. And essentially it's the same thing. There's a row of 2 grown hedges, and then there is the 1 original hedge on top of it. But in this case, rather than the original hedge having to be on top, it has to be on the right side. So the 3-tile L works whenever the original hedge is on the right side, and you can see in both examples that dark green hedge is on the right side of those 4 tiles, and then as a result it fills in that last empty tile, whereas with the 4 tile L special case, the original hedge always has to be on the top row instead of the right. And so I felt like this accounted for pretty much every single case, so now I want to go into some specific examples and actually show you the gameplay of how all these rules apply, since I've been sort of just talking at you for a bit. So let's just jump into those cases. So here those purple walls are sort of in the same shape as they would be in the training cave, because this is where I filmed all the footage to test all these theories. And so this first example is going to be if you threw your super right here, and these were the original 5 tiles of the hedge. And now this tile right here has a hedge on one side and a wall on the other, so it's going to be a 1 tile gap, and so the algorithm is going to fill it in. And same thing over here, there's a hedge above it and a wall below it, so it's going to get filled in. And then none of the other rules actually apply, so this is going to be the ending wall structure that you're going to see when you throw Sprout Super in this location. And now this tile here is a 1 tile gap because it has a hedge on this side and a wall on this side, so it's going to get filled in. But now this other tile that was filled in before doesn't have a wall below it, so it's no longer 1 tile gap, and none of the other rules apply, so this is actually going to be the resulting structure of this situation. Now in this example, these 2 tiles are no longer blocked by walls, but now this tile has a hedge on one side and a wall on the other side, so it's a 1 tile gap, so it's going to be filled in, and then everything else is so far away that none of the other rules apply. Now this situation gets a bit trickier, so we see we have a 1 tile gap over here, so that's going to be filled in, and then over here we also have these 2 tiles are diagonally apart from each other with that space in between. So since these 2 gaps are open, so there aren't any walls that are adjacent to this diagonal wall, then we can fill in this center square. And then once you do this, this creates another 1 tile gap, so that's going to also get filled in. And you might also have noticed we've created this adjacent diagonal here rather than the 1 gap in between, so we're going to have to fill in one of these 2 squares, and like I said, you always go horizontal, so this one's going to get filled in. And then finally we have one more tile to fill in because we've just created the special case here where we have 4 tiles in that L shape. We've got the 3 on the bottom, and then we've got that 1 original tile on the top, so this one is going to get filled in, and this is going to be the resulting wall shape. Now for this example, there's a lot of the same things coming up, so we see that this center square here actually is diagonal across from this wall right here, and so we can fill in this tile, and then on the other side it's just a mirror image with this center tile and this wall. So those 2 are going to be able to be filled in. And now this always happens when you have the 1 space diagonals, but you create now an adjacent diagonal. So we have to fill in one of these 2 squares, and we always go horizontal. So that one gets filled in, and then same on the other side, the one going to the right is going to get filled in. And now we've actually created a special case, and this is the 3 tile L. So this is when you have the original hedge that is on the right side with the 2 other grown hedges on the bottom. So this only applies to this left portion, but not the right portion, because the original hedge here is on the left side rather than the right side. So this tile is going to get filled in, and that's all we can do here. For this example, it's fairly simple. You can see that we have these 2 1 tile gaps here, and actually this creates a special case with the 3 tile L. I forgot to mention actually that a wall can also serve as one of the grown hedges. So here we have that 3 tile L with the wall and the hedge as the bottom 2 tiles and the original hedge as the top tiles. That means this one is going to get filled in, and this is going to be the resulting shape. Now for this example, we have no diagonals that aren't already filled in, and we have no 1 tile gaps, so this is just going to be as it is. There's nothing that's going to grow from this. And this example is probably even a little more obvious. There's really nothing you can do here, nothing related to diagonal or 1 tile gap, so this is also just going to stay as it is and not grow any new walls. So I've just got a couple more for you guys. Now we're going to start interacting with this corner over here, so things are going to get a bit more complicated. But first, you can see in this example we have a wall here, and we have the center square that's diagonally across from it, so we're going to fill in this tile here. And then of course that's going to create another adjacent diagonal, so we have to fill it in horizontally. And then we just do the same thing on the other side because it is symmetric. So we fill in this center square that's in the middle of the diagonal of this wall and this center. And then we create another adjacent diagonal, which you can fill in horizontally. And now we have a 3 tile L here. Because remember, the 3 tile L only works when the original hedge is on the right side, and even though it's on the bottom, it still works as long as it's on the right side. So that means we're going to fill in that 4th tile right here. And then over here in the corner, we've actually created a 1 tile gap, so that's also going to get filled in, and then this is going to be the resulting figure. Now for this position, we have the 2 diagonals that we can fill in here, and then we create the closer together diagonals, which we can fill in horizontally. We also have a 1 tile gap that we just created here, here, and here. and then there's also one in the corner all the way over here, and that's actually going to be it. None of the special cases are going to apply here. Now for this case, this is representing the other part of the training cave where there's a vertical gap in the wall, so this is going to give us a couple different interactions. So for this case, you can see we have the diagonals that we can start and fill in, and then of course we always go horizontal, so this one is going to get filled in rather than this square. And then we also have another diagonal with this wall and this hedge right here, and then we can fill in that diagonal and of course fill in horizontally as well. And now I've created two one tile gaps here and here, as well as the one tile gaps here and here. So now we got a pretty solid wall, and this is going to be it for this case. For this one, we can fill in the diagonal and also fill in horizontally for the closer together diagonal. We can fill in this one tile gap up here, as well as a one tile gap that we just created, and this is going to be the finished wall structure. And now this is the last one I want to show you guys. So you can have the diagonal right here that you can fill in, and then you go horizontally. And for this one, you have the diagonal that you fill in and go horizontally, and then you have the one tile gap in between. And this is very similar to the one we just saw before that had this same structure but just moved back one tile, except this isn't actually what happens. Instead, it actually goes vertical here rather than horizontal, and this is the only case I could find of it doing this. So this is very, very weird, and it's probably another special case that I didn't take into account, but it only happened for one specific instance, so I didn't want to include it in my cases. But I guess if you're doing it in this exact position, this is going to be resulting shape. But like I said, this is probably not directly programmed in, and it's just a side effect of some weird things going on with the algorithm. But overall, a lot of the rules I talked about are probably directly programmed in, and so they're going to account for most of the situations you come across. So hopefully that was still largely helpful to you. That's going to wrap it up for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like and a comment down below if you did. And don't forget to subscribe to see more content like this. But that's all for today, guys. So see you later.
Make the strings louder.